Have you ever found yourself in the middle of a love triangle? I have, perhaps on few too many occasions. But as I've been thinking back into my earliest sexualized experiences, I couldn't help but recall being absolutely in love with some kid that was like a 40-minute drive away from my hometown, and also in love with his best friend. I had such an alarmingly low self-esteem at that moment where I was just so willing to take attention from any place that I could get it. And I remember being absolutely head over heels for maybe the hottest person I'd ever seen. I don't remember how I met him at this rate, but I know that we constantly went to shows together, like music shows. And I would see him and I was so enamored. And the moment that he gave me any sort of attention, I felt like my belly was doing somersaults, butterflies, every pore in my body opened up and sweat would come out. I was so afraid to talk to him. But when he was giving me attention, I was like, oh my gosh, let's go. And little did I know he came along with this like group of also equally as attractive gentlemen that also wanted to give me attention. This was, I think, one of my first instances of understanding that I had a body that people were going to lust after. And we hung out together all the time, like my girlfriends, all the guys, like, I mean, I'm sure you remember like teenage love and how uncomfortable and awkward it was, and how everyone is living in their own heads. And at this rate, I definitely found alcohol and was abusing it because it made me feel like I could be my authentic self. And I just partied with these kids. I had so much fun with them. I remember the first time that that guy kissed me, and I felt like I was on the moon. Like I had not a single problem. I no longer cared that my parents were getting a divorce. I had zero fucks given about the school that I had transitioned to where nobody knew me and nobody liked me. And for that moment, with his mouth on my mouth, everything felt okay, or at least manageable. I don't know. I feel like when we were younger, we could just kind of see the world through different lenses. And I love how hopeful I was back then. I've always been a lover of love, and he was certainly kind of like a gateway drug into it. The only issue is that I also was really attracted to his friend who was giving me a lot of attention also. And basically, what had happened in this set of unfortunate circumstances is I pinned two friends against one another. So it's kind of a tale of love triangles and just triangles in general and how they have never worked out for me. And also the first time I was ever shamed for my period. So ideally, you've listened to the first experience of where I was talking about losing my virginity. Hilariously, I think all of these guys went to the same school, which is just so messy of me. Many, many years of mess ahead of me. But it was a house party. I was at this guy's house. We had been making out. I don't think anything else really. I'd certainly felt what he had going on in his pants, you know what I mean? And so we were making out in his bed and having a hot and heavy time. And I had never, I mean, listen, I still don't think periods are spoken about all that regularly, but I certainly wasn't talking about it back then. I had a lot of shame around it, and I would like hide my tampons and hide that I had a period, all of these things. So we get to this moment of where maybe we had an agreement that we were going to have sex or something. But I also recall being in a bunk bed. Like, what is up with me and having intimate experiences in just the least comfortable spaces? uh, so we are probably drunk, maybe a little high on weed at this rate. And he is like making sexual advances towards me. And I am literally like, the stomach in my throat. Everything is tight. I don't know how to tell this person like, hey, PS, I have my period. At this rate, I don't think anyone was talking about having sex on your period, let alone like being okay with it. So I didn't know how to say it because I didn't want to ruin the experience. I didn't want to have him think that I was dirty or gross, or have him say something really awful to me. So I waited until the worst time where we're basically almost intimate. And I'm like, hey, by the way, I have my period. And he immediately like jumped up and jumped out of bed and pulled back from me. And I was mortified. Everything that I had thought had really come to a head in that moment. And I didn't know what to do or how to react. And he basically was like, well, you should have told me, and like left the room. And then I just remember going to the bathroom and sobbing. and sobbing and being like, man, I really messed this up. For whatever reason, there was no recovery from that for us. I think perhaps he felt betrayed that I didn't tell him that this thing that happens to most every vulva haver at this rate was a normal thing and that I shouldn't be shamed about it. I didn't have the voice that I have now, but I was mortified. And so we continue to all hang out together as groups. I kind of knew nothing was going to happen with him moving forward, primarily because of the way that he made me feel. But also, I think he was pretty disinterested. And so, coming off of realizing that I'm a mistress, moving into my next sexual scenario, and then having to tell him that I have a period and having him jump out of bed, I was like, man, I am doomed, huh? So fast forward, I don't know how long, but I had had a house party and the guys were over and we were all having a great time. And his friend and I were getting really close and, just like doing those sweet little nose nuzzles and enjoying kind of being in each other's company. And next thing I knew, his mouth was on my mouth and it was the worst feeling. It was the worst sensation. It was nothing that I had with his friend. And as his tongue was jabbing into my mouth and I think legitimately hitting my teeth, I was like, oh no, we have made a very, very large mistake. Abort mission. How do I get out of this? How do I get everyone out of my house? What do I do? They're going to talk to one another. They're going to realize this. Are they going to think I'm a slut? What's happening here? X, Y, and Z. I think all of this happened in my head within like a 10-second frame. And I pulled back and I was like, oh, we probably shouldn't do this. This probably isn't the move. And so I aborted that mission and decided that I could never see them again. And I don't know about boy drama, but there certainly was a lot of it because the dynamics of all of our relationships changed very quickly. I don't think we really hung out together as a group after that. It was a pretty humiliating experience. And also, then the guy that I'd made out with on the dirt mound was also friends with these dudes. And he was like, how many of our friends are you going to go through? And I remember in my head thinking, I don't know, all of you? Like, who cares? We're young. We're supposed to be having fun. And then I also had to remember that most everyone, I feel like in high school, they were like looking for the one, right? Like, I come from a small town, people generally stay. And I don't know what the hell we were doing at the age of 16 of looking for the one, but it's pretty comical in retrospect. So that basically all imploded. And I wish I'd learned my lesson about, not getting in between friends, but certainly there are many more stories to come along from that. But my first few experiences were pretty sad. Um, so, going from being the mistress and then into almost splitting up a friendship, these were not my proudest moments. And then I also learned how to shame myself and how to, abandon what was going on within me, and thinking that my period was something that needed to be hid, that I couldn't talk about it, that there was something wrong with me for it. P.S. When I got my period for the first time, I didn't really understand what it was. I don't think my mom had told me what was going to happen to me. So I hid it and I thought that I was dying. So I would bleed in my underwear and then throw it out because I didn't want her to know that her daughter was dying. So lots and lots of like head noise caught up with these kinds of things. And I just think it's comical now because my girlfriends and I talk about our period all the time. We don't hide our tampons or our period panties or our cups or anything. We're kind of like, let's get into the nitty gritty of it. And I just wish that little me kind of knew that that was available, that this life that I'm currently living was on its way. So perhaps I could have saved myself from some heartache and a lot of self-hatred. But, you live and you learn. These formative experiences, I think, are really important and they shape us into who we are. And eventually I got over my fear of period sex and, anyone who had anything to say about it, I'd be like, no, thank you. Bye. But I think it's always fun looking back at like those first moments. So perhaps for now, you kind of take a leap back in time of when's the first time you had to tell somebody you had your period? How did it feel for you? Or have you ever been in a love triangle and have it explode like mine? Feel free to reach out, share your stories with me, but I hope you enjoyed this little walk down memory lane.